This is the lesson 2.5 mini lesson, and it's also our do what. So we have a graph here, and here's our prompt. So remember, I'm circling what I need to do. So math prompt says decide. So what am I deciding? If the points graphed vary directly. Then it tells me to explain. Explain how I know. Then it tells me to determine if the data is discrete or continuous. Then it tells me to determine the constant. I don't think I need the word and there. Determine the constant, and then also what does it mean in terms of the problem. And then I need to interpret the meaning of point 5.5. So there is a lot we have to do. So I'm going to number these. Number 1 says decide if the points graph vary directly. So I'm going to decide if the points vary directly. Okay, second thing I'm going to do. I need to explain how I know. Explain how I know if the points vary directly. So this is just a yes, no. This is how do I know that? 3 tells me to determine if it's discrete or continuous. Determining discrete or continuous. And then I'm going to determine the constant. So that's the 4th thing I need to do. Determine the constant and what it means in the problem. And the final thing I do is interpret. So there would be a lot of room for forgetting to answer something. So I'm interpreting the meaning of 5.5. So now I'm going to have to take a look at all of this. I am going to, under point 3, anything I need to do with some math work, and under point 4, I'm going to do any of my words that I need to write out. So first of all, it says decide if the points vary directly. Okay, so I'm going to answer that one down here. So I'm just going to put a number 1. So I'm looking at this, and I know when I see the words vary directly, it means that it has to be straight and through the origin. And I can see that if I were to connect these, this is a straight, and it would go through the origin. So number 1, it just says decide if the points vary directly. I'm going to say yes, the points vary directly. That's it. That's all they asked. But then number 2, so I'm also doing that down here. It says to explain how you know the points are straight and go through the origin. Now, some of you might say, but, Mrs. DeClark, there's blue dots here, and there is not a blue dot at the origin. However, if I were to take a straight edge and extend it, there would be dots that would go through the origin. So if I just kind of did line these up, you can see there would be a dot at the origin, and there could be more up here yet too. So it is direct variation. Okay, now I'm on 3. Determine if it's discrete or continuous. So I know when they don't connect, it starts with the letter D, then that implies discrete. So the answer to question 3 is it is discrete. And they didn't ask me why, but I'm going to just say it anyway. They did not connect the points. Okay, now 4 says to determine the constant and what it means. So I'm going to do that up in this area. So what do I know about constant? Constant's letter K, and I know it equals y over x. So I'm going back up to my graph, and I know this is the y side and this is the x side. But some of these are at like really icky numbers, because I see here this is a 0.5, here's a 1, 1.5. So I'm going to try to find something that's at an intersection that looks kind of easy for me to work with. So I see that it would have been really great if there was a point along 1, but there isn't. I could either take this 0.5 or I could use this 1.5, and I think I'm going to do that one. So the y value is 1.5, and if I go down, the x value would be 15. So it's 1.5 over 15. So when I take 1.5 over 15, I can just use a calculator to divide this. 1.5 divided by 15, and I get 0.1, which is the same thing as 1/10. And I could say it's 0.1 over 1. So all of these are equal to each other. Now, what does this mean in terms of the problem situation? Because 4 says determine the constant and what it means. I'm always going to use the 1 in the denominator when I go to explain what the constant means. So remember, this is the y, and when I go back to the graph, y stands for the cost in dollars. So it's 0.1 is dollars. So to make it look like dollars, 0.1 is dollars. I'm going to add a 0, so it's really 10 cents. And then the denominator is the number of photos. So again, if I go down to here, the denominator is 1, and that stands for photos. So what my constant means is it is 10 cents per photo. So if we always take it to a unit rate when we're finding our constant, put the two labels on. The label from the y was dollars. The label from the x, and I got this right off my graph, was photos. So it's 10 cents for every one photo. So question 5 says to interpret. So I'm going to do that again down on the bottom here. 5 says to interpret the meaning of 5, 0.5. So again, I know that when we write points in coordinate form, this first point is x, the second point is y. And when I look back up at my graph, I see x is photos. So I could say this is photos, and the y is the cost. So if I'm going to interpret this point, it means 5 photos, and its 0.5 is the cost. So I would say 5 photos cost $0.5, which does not make any sense. Money goes to the hundredths, so that means 5 photos would cost me 50 cents, which should make sense because we said it's 10 cents for every one photo. So 1 is 10 cents, 2 would be 20, 3 would be 30, 4 would be 40, 5 would be 50 cents.